Hello and welcome back to the Electronic Intifada's live stream for Thursday, September 4th. Thank you for tuning in. I'm Nora Barrows-Friedman with my colleagues Ali Abunimah, Jon Elmer, Asa Winstanley, and Tamara Nassar. It's day 699 of Israel's genocide in Gaza. Coming up, we'll speak to our contributor Abubaker Abed, a journalist from Deir Balah refugee camp in the Gaza Strip. He was evacuated to Ireland as a student in April, and he'll talk about his experience, his advocacy and journalism work, and the situation his family, friends, and colleagues are facing back home. Later on in the program, Jon will bring us all the latest resistance news from Gaza, including a breakdown of an ambush in Beit Hanun and the battle in southern Gaza City. But first, let's take a look at the news. Here's a brief summary of some of the latest developments this week in Palestine. Israel has killed at least 571 Palestinians and injured nearly 2,320 between August 27th and September 3rd, according to official records from the Ministry of Health in Gaza. The Israeli army has committed massacres in Gaza City and northern Gaza areas, using airstrikes, fire belts, drone attacks, and bomb-filled remote-controlled vehicles to destroy residential buildings, ambulances, and tent shelters of displaced Palestinian families. On Saturday, August 30th, Israel bombed a bakery and a tent shelter in Al-Nasser neighborhood of Gaza City, killing at least 12 children and adults as they were waiting for bread. Journalist Mustafa Sarsour captured video of a man in agony as he mourned over the bodies of 3 small children. Al-Nasser neighborhood was bombed again on Monday, September 1st. Reporter Mahmoud Abu Salama reported from Al-Shifa Hospital in Gaza City, where bodies of Palestinians were brought in by their families on carts and stretchers. Another massacre of children happened on Tuesday, September 2nd, when at least 5 children were killed while waiting for water in Al-Mawasi in western Gaza, an area the Israeli army had designated as a so-called safe zone, but which it has bombed relentlessly over the course of the last 23 months. Mahmoud Basal, the spokesperson for Gaza's civil defense, said that the children, quote, were standing in line to fill up water in the Al-Mawasi area, which has been described as safe, when the occupation forces directly targeted them, turning their search for life into a new massacre. Euromed Human Rights Monitor stated on Wednesday that its field team reviewed several videos published by Israeli soldiers showing them, quote, shooting at Palestinians in displacement camps for amusement or to bet on their accuracy. This demonstrates that the shooting is not driven by any specific purpose or military necessity, but rather reflects a deliberate policy aimed at causing maximum civilian deaths and destruction, while denying Palestinians any sense of safety, Euromed added. The group documented the killing of Ahlam Ra'ed Faiz al-Sha'ir, 26, a mother of 2, by Israeli army gunfire on the morning of September 1st, while she was making tea in her tent in Al-Mawasi. Al-Sha'ir's father-in-law told Euromed Monitor's team that his daughter-in-law was preparing tea for her 2 children, Ayman and Karam, when an Israeli quadcopter shot her in the head in front of them. He said his 2 grandchildren are now orphans. Humanitarian activist Saeed Shoaib captured this clip moments after Israeli forces committed a massacre in the Burej refugee camp in central Gaza on Sunday. The screams of children can be heard as the camera shows images of shredded bodies and injured children, which have been blurred. Israel is using incendiary bombs and grenades to set fires to buildings and tent shelters. Instagram user 𝐓𝐡𝐞 filmed footage of one such attack earlier this week with enormous plumes of flames and smoke enveloping a residential building. Israeli forces set the tents of displaced families ablaze on Wednesday, September 3rd, by dropping grenades on shelters in the Sheikh Radwan neighborhood of Gaza City. A 60-year-old mother of 5 told an international news agency that Sheikh Radwan, quote, is being burned upside down. The occupation destroyed houses, burned tents, and drones played audio messages ordering people to leave the area. Quote, if the takeover of Gaza City isn't stopped, we might die, and we are not going to forgive anyone who stands and watches without doing anything to prevent our death, she said. Our contributor Asim Al-Nabih in Gaza City wrote on Tuesday that, quote, every day and for 2 weeks now, several massive explosions have been occurring, which the Gazawis have come to call nasif, demolitions, where columns of smoke mixed with thick dust rise up. And while we cannot see the rubble of our homes and neighborhoods that are being demolished, the force of the explosion is enough to make a piece of your heart explode completely as soon as another part of Gaza explodes, Asim wrote. Israel used incendiary bombs to target cars and ambulances near a clinic in the Sheikh Radwan neighborhood on Tuesday. Civil defense worker Mohammed Abu Luay filmed his colleagues as they scrambled for buckets of water, trying to extinguish the flames.
ايش كمان حريق ورا العياده بقول لك هاي كمان حريق قدام حريقه معتز كمان طياره في كمان حريق رمت كمان هاي يلا حماد فوق في جردة بنعبي ميه بنحاول نطفيها نلحقها راحت الطياره عندك جردة المي راحت هاي ميه هاي جردة عبينا ميه بسرعه
خليه يشبع عبي من تحت عبي يا اخي ايوه عبي يا معتز ضخ ميه
ما نفسه اسعاف هو
خليه ضخ قول له ضخ راح يلف المطاف يا معتز.
That was the civil defense on Tuesday in Sheikh Radwan, Gaza City. Earlier that day, journalist Mahmoud Abu Salama reported from Sheikh Radwan to document the advance of the Israeli army. Abu Salama says that during the invasion, along with detonating bomb-filled vehicles to destroy buildings, Israeli snipers have been targeting Palestinians on the streets. He says, quote, as you can see, bullets are hitting civilians and gunfire is being fired from vehicles and snipers stationed around Sheikh Radwan, he said. While she was reporting live earlier this week, Al Jazeera journalist Noor Abu Rokba broke down in tears talking about her mother being forcibly displaced amidst the annihilation of Gaza City. She says, quote, my mom doesn't know where to go or where the next destination will be. The situation is extremely difficult. The occupation is trying to split the city of Gaza from its homeowners. It's trying to encircle them in the west of Gaza, showing them no mercy. It is shelling them wherever they are. It is shelling them in the tents. It is shelling them on the beach. Her colleague Hamam Yunus captured this clip.
أين تذهب ولا تعلم أين ستكون محطتها القادمة. أتحدث إليك يسري عن وضع ميداني صعب جدا. الاحتلال يحاول أن يفرغ مدينة غزة من سكانها، يحاول أن يكدسهم في غرب غزة ولكن لا يرحمهم، يقصفهم أينما كانوا، يقصفهم في الخيام، قصفهم في الشاطئ الذي يعتبر غرب غزة، ليس في جنوب مدينة غزة كالزيتون وليس في شمال شرق غزة.
Noor Abu Rokba. Israel is determined to wipe Gaza City off the map, Euromed Human Rights Monitor declared on September 1st, and it is using an arsenal of some of the most destructive tools ever built with complete impunity. Quote, the Israeli army is destroying about 300 residential units daily in Gaza City and Jabalia, using around 15 robots carrying nearly 100 tons of explosives, Euromed stated. These bombings are taking place at an unprecedented pace, aimed at destroying Gaza City and displacing its residents as part of a dangerous escalation of the ongoing genocide against Palestinians in the Gaza Strip for nearly 23 months. Euromed Monitor's field team documented the Israeli army's intensified use of armored, explosive-laden robots to achieve their goal of completely erasing one of Palestine's oldest and largest cities. Euromed says that at the current rate, the rest of the city could be destroyed within 2 months, a timeline that may shorten further given the Israeli army's massive firepower and the absence of any pressure to halt its crimes against Palestinians. After preliminary assessments of the robot attacks, Euromed Monitor estimates that each robot can completely or partially destroy around 20 housing units. This will soon leave hundreds of thousands of people without homes or shelters, forcing them to flee once again in deadly conditions without even the bare minimum for survival. The robots used in the bombing are essentially Israeli military vehicles, such as outdated M113 armored personnel carriers, loaded with tons of explosives and remotely piloted through civilian neighborhoods. They are directed to explode in carefully selected locations to maximize destruction. In some cases, the robot is not rigged to detonate, but is fitted with large boxes of explosives that are unloaded at the target site, after which the vehicle is returned to base for reuse in other operations. This reflects an organized military strategy aimed at systematically destroying residential neighborhoods and maximizing the scale of devastation, Euromed stated. However, the rescue workers and civil defense crews say that they are continuing to use all available tools to continue their work protecting their community. Mohammed Abu Luai, the civil defense worker who I mentioned earlier, made this video explaining how he and his colleagues managed to keep saving lives under the most unbearable conditions. He says, quote, have you ever asked yourself how we, throughout the entire period of war, how we saved thousands of lives and retrieved dozens of martyrs from underneath the rubble? Let me show you how we work with the equipment. Of course, the equipment is very simple and light, consisting of work gloves, a spade, a shovel, a bolt cutter, and a sledgehammer. If there is a ceiling and there are people underneath the rubble, we would have to break the ceiling so we can rescue the civilians. There are big and small cutters, big and small hammers. Give them to any country in the world and they would tell you it's impossible for them to work with these tools. But here in Gaza, nothing is impossible. With the power of God first and the high morale of our men second, we work with the simple equipment all the time. Here is Gaza, a symbol of pride, where nothing is impossible. Meanwhile, Israeli soldiers working with U.S. mercenary forces continue to trap, abduct, hunt, and kill Palestinians seeking aid at the private Gaza Humanitarian Foundation sites every day. The Palestinian Ministry of Health in Gaza reported that since May 27th, when the GHF sites opened, until today, at least 2,339 Palestinians have been killed and more than 17,000 injured while trying to obtain meager amounts of food aid. This week, Instagram user 𝐓𝐡𝐞 filmed himself at a GHF site under relentless fire while trying to obtain a bag of flour for his family. A group of experts at the United Nations, including Special Rapporteur for Human Rights in Palestine, Francesca Albanese, and Special Rapporteur on the Right to Food, Michael Fakhri, condemned the ongoing enforced disappearing of starving Palestinians at the GHF sites, urging Israel to end its, quote, heinous crime against an already vulnerable population. Reports of enforced disappearances targeting starving civilians seeking their basic right to food is not only shocking, but amounts to torture. Using food as a tool to conduct targeted and mass disappearances needs to end now, the experts said. In late August, the rights group Defense for Children International Palestine reported that 5 Palestinian boys between the ages of 12 and 16 remain missing in separate incidents between late June and early August. DCIP says it interviewed the boys' families who have continually searched hospitals and morgues for their sons' bodies and have found no signs of them. Each of the boys disappeared while in the Zikim border area, located in North Gaza, where aid trucks cross into Gaza. The families fear their children have been abducted and disappeared by Israeli forces. Ayed Abu Aktesh, Accountability Program Director at DCIP, said, quote, Israeli forces are shooting, detaining, and disappearing Palestinian children seeking aid in Gaza. Israeli forces have refused to disclose the numbers, names, and whereabouts of Palestinian children from Gaza in military custody, and these children have had no contact with the outside world. We have more than 2 decades of evidence indicating that Israeli forces torture Palestinian children in military detention. All of these children must be released and reunited with their families immediately. As the Electronic Intifada reported in August, a group of children who were kidnapped in late June by Israeli forces at a Gaza Humanitarian Foundation site in Rafah, southern Gaza, were released a month later. They described their brutal torture and detention inside Israel's Sde Teiman concentration camp, where they were interrogated, beaten, and psychologically and physically tortured. Children and adults alike are continuing to die of starvation across Gaza. The United Nations Children's Fund, UNICEF, this week stated that every single child in Gaza under 5 years old, more than 320,000 children, is at risk of acute malnutrition. On Wednesday, the Ministry of Health in Gaza reported that 6 deaths from starvation were recorded in a 24-hour period, including 1 child, bringing the total number of recorded starvation deaths to 367, including 131 children. Since the announcement 2 weeks ago by the Integrated Food Security Phase Classification, or IPC, the Health Ministry says that 89 deaths, including 16 children, have been recorded. The Gaza Government Media Office stated on Monday, September 1st, that still only 15% of the necessary amount of trucks have entered Gaza. Looting and theft by Israel-backed armed gangs continue, the media office reports, and Israel has prevented the entry of 430 basic and vital food items, such as eggs, meat, fish, cheese, and other dairy products, fruits and vegetables, and nutritional supplements required for pregnant and nursing mothers. Israel assassinated at least 2 journalists in Gaza this week. On Sunday, August 31st, 𝐓𝐡𝐞 Abed, who worked as a reporter for 𝐓𝐡𝐞 𝐄𝐥𝐞𝐿 satellite channel, was killed in an attack on her apartment in Gaza City. On Tuesday, September 2nd, photojournalist Rasmi Jihad Salem was killed. He worked for the Al Manara media company, Press TV, and Al Alam TV. The Shahab news agency reported that he was killed by Israeli shelling in Gaza City. The Gaza Government Media Office says that at least 248 reporters and media workers have been killed by Israel since October 2023. Israeli forces once again bombed the inside walls of Al-Aqsa Martyrs Hospital in Deir Balah on September 1st for the 14th time since October 2023, according to the Gaza Government Media Office. Israel bombed a tent for displaced persons inside the walls of the hospital grounds, specifically near the hospital's outpatient clinic, the media office added. Quote, this resulted in injuries at the site of the bombing, material damage, and the immediate threat of death to dozens of patients inside the hospital. In Gaza City, reporter Saeed Hasballah filmed a low-flying quadcopter drone hovering over the Al-Ahli Arab Hospital on Wednesday. At Al-Shifa Hospital, also in Gaza City, emergency room doctor Farhan Abdulaziz described the total destruction of hospital buildings. He walked around the nearby cemetery where patients were buried with the headboards of their hospital beds, serving as tombstones.
Standing outside 𝐓𝐡𝐞 Hospital, and as you can see behind me, this is one side of the building completely destroyed, blasted the walls through, and then set on fire. Patients were inside that were burned alive. There was, of course, killing of patients and their families. And right outside, on the side of the hospital, you find this graveyard. And even though it's been months, you still find the smell of the dead bodies for a few reasons. One, normally we put the bodies in cement graves. These are shallow graves without any of that capability. The bodies are put right on the ground. But one of the things that breaks my heart is that you see behind me, you can see to my left, immediately behind me, and the third, 3 different parts of the hospital beds. The back part of beds that literally in residency we would rush to rapid responses and take those off to intubate a patient and save their life. Literally, we would take that off to have access to the patient's head and save their life. And now you see it's a marker of death here at 𝐓𝐡𝐞 Hospital in Gaza, where they're using literally the markers of hospital beds to mark the graves of patients and families that were murdered, massacred by the Israeli army when they came here and killed how many people they killed and imprisoned others and took them to the torture camps. It's such a sad moment in history, but a mark that we should not forget the reality of this Israeli occupation.
That was Dr. Farhan Abdulaziz. The lawyer for Dr. Hussam Abu Safiya, the pediatrician and director of Kamal Adwan Hospital in North Gaza, who was abducted by Israeli forces at the end of December 2024, was able to visit her client on August 28th. 𝐓𝐡𝐞 𝐄𝐥𝐿 said that her client, Dr. Abu Safiya, and his nephew are both being held in the Ofer military prison. They are both suffering from scabies and other skin infections as the Israeli prison guards are forcing them to wear the same clothes every day and are only allowed infrequent 2-minute baths. Abu Safiya and his nephew have both lost a third of their body weight and are being held in cells without access to sunlight. They are allowed outside only 30 minutes a month, she said. Dr. Abu Safiya gave his lawyer the following message to the world. Quote, "I entered in the name of humanity, and I will leave in the name of humanity. I am the one who was abducted from inside the hospital. We will remain on our land and continue to provide healthcare services to the people, God willing, even from a tent." Meanwhile, doctors and staff at Al-Quds Hospital in Gaza City, together with the Palestine Red Crescent Society, announced that against all odds, they have successfully reactivated the cardiac catheterization clinic this week. The Red Crescent said that in a 48-hour period, medical teams successfully performed 3 cardiac catheterization procedures, with 3 more scheduled, despite the dire conditions and the shortage of essential medicines and critical medical supplies. This achievement, they say, is especially significant in light of the continued closure of border crossings, which prevents thousands of patients from traveling outside the Strip for treatment. In related news, the Hind Rajab Foundation announced that along with the Palestinian Center for Human Rights, they submitted a formal complaint to the International Criminal Court regarding the massacre at Nasser Medical Complex in Khan Yunis on August 25th. The attack, as we reported last week, killed 22 civilians, including 5 journalists, 3 hospital staff, 1 doctor, a civil defense worker, and 1 child, 14-year-old Rayyan Omar Mahmoud Abu Omar. More than 50 others were injured in what can only be described as a deliberate double-tap strike carried out with full knowledge of the civilian presence, the group stated. Lieutenant Colonel Bar Virkat of the Sayeret Golani, the reconnaissance unit of the Golani Brigade, Colonel Bar Ganon of the Golani Brigade, Colonel Miki Sharvit of the 188th Brigade, Brigadier General Moran Omar of the 36th Division, were named in the complaint to the ICC. along with other commanders and top military leaders, including Israeli Prime Minister and war crimes fugitive Benjamin Netanyahu. Quote, with today's filing before the ICC, the Hind Rajab Foundation and the Palestinian Center for Human Rights demand that the court open proceedings and issue arrest warrants against those responsible, from the Golani operators who designated the target, to the tank commanders who launched the missiles, to the generals who approved the attack, and ultimately to Prime Minister Netanyahu, who provided political cover. This massacre was not the result of chaos or confusion, but of a carefully executed plan under a clear chain of command, the groups say. Journalists, doctors, rescue workers, and even a child were killed deliberately under the watching eyes of Israeli drones. This was not only a war crime, it was an act of genocide. We've published many features on the Electronic Intifada in the last week, but we wanted to highlight What My Sister Teaches Me About Survival by Asim al-Nabih, writing from Gaza City. Nearly 13 years ago, during Israel's assault on Gaza in 2012, I took this photo of my youngest sister, Nesma, Asim writes. She was almost 5 years old, full of energy and curiosity. Despite the power cuts and relentless bombardment, she would sit quietly with her book, diligently completing her kindergarten exercises. At the time, I didn't realize that this small act, holding a pen amid chaos, would become the very definition of her life in Gaza. Today, history has repeated itself. I took another photo of Nesma, now 17 years old. The scene looks the same, Nesma, her books, and her determination. But everything else has changed. She is no longer in her room. She has been displaced for months. She no longer has teachers or classrooms. Her school is being used as a shelter. There are no textbooks, desks, electricity, or internet. She studies in the middle of a war, surrounded by hunger, siege, and death. She's survived 6 Israeli assaults on Gaza since she was born in 2008. She's brilliant, fluent in 3 languages, gifted in mathematics and physics, and dreams of becoming a doctor. But now she studies under unimaginable conditions. Still, she perseveres. Gaza's children embody extraordinary sacrifice. They have endured starvation, thirst, displacement, and the constant threat of death. What makes their suffering so profound is that the world continues to watch and express outrage, but has failed to end the genocide. Liberation is not just about weapons or politics. It is about preserving life, identity, and dignity in the face of annihilation. In Gaza, education is not just about personal ambition. It is about collective survival. Every child like Nesma who continues to learn is insisting on a future in defiance of Israel's aims to destroy it. Education cannot thrive under bombs, and no child should have to teach herself in a shelter without electricity or clean water. Our supporters outside Gaza must not only push for an end to the genocide, but also commit to rebuilding our schools, universities, and libraries, our places of knowledge and culture. Ultimately, Palestine does not need charity. It needs freedom, dignity, and the ability for its children to dream again without fear. Nesma has become my teacher. She reminds me every day that perseverance is a form of resistance, that survival itself is a statement of defiance. While powerful forces beyond their control make decisions with a profound impact on their fate, children like her quietly rebuild hope, one word, one page, and one dream at a time. When I see her diligently pursue her studies under the worst of circumstances, I know that one day Nesma will fulfill her dream of becoming a doctor. She will heal the wounds of her people, just as she heals mine with her determination to study, dream, and build a life despite the war, starvation, and siege. Those are excerpts from What My Sister Teaches Me About Survival by Asim al-Nabih, writing from Gaza on electronicintifada.net. Asim is an engineer, a father, a husband, a writer, and the spokesperson for the Gaza municipality in Gaza City. And now, as we always do, we wanted to highlight people expressing joy, determination, and resilience across Gaza. Students of the Gaza-based Camp Breakers dance crew showed off their skills this week. Music teacher Ahmed Mouin Abu Amsha, whose video, as you'll remember, we featured just a few weeks ago, showing him and his students harmonizing with the hum of the drones, says he and his colleagues took their students to the beach to play music. Quote, they brought their instruments, and to our surprise, Mouin, Ibrahim, Yusuf, Muhammad, and Yasin began singing and playing music for the children in the tents by the shore. We watched with pride and joy, realizing that our students are now following in their teachers' footsteps, spreading love, music, and hope to others. This is the strongest proof of our success in teaching music, even in the hardest times, he says. That was from Ahmed Mouin Abu Amsha. And finally, social media user and mother Noor Abdul Latif posted this photo of her son, Yamen, on his first day of kindergarten. She posted later in the day, quote, after his first day, joy lit him up so brightly, so he let go of my hand for the first time since the war began. He dashed ahead, his feet barely touching the ground, as if the sea breeze had lifted him, carried him, played with his hair. Fly, O little bird of my heart, for that's what birds are born to do, to rise, to dance with the wind, to taste the sky in freedom. And that's it for the news roundup. As always, go to electronicintifada.net for much more, especially to read our new features by our brave writers in Gaza. You're watching the Electronic Intifada live stream. I'm Nora Barrows-Friedman with my colleague, Ali Abunimah. Hi, Ali.
Hi, Nora. It's good to see you back. We were away last week.
Yes.
And so much happened. You even while you're away, you still put together a news report that was put up on our YouTube and other channels, because just the utter horror is it's just hard to keep up with. So thank you for that. But where were you last week?
I was invited to speak on a panel at the People's Conference for Palestine in Detroit. It was spectacular. I think it was the most social I had been in years. It was a big change for me, and I didn't expect the amount of love and gratitude that people. I mean, all day people were coming up to me and saying how much they appreciate the Electronic Intifada. People were like shoving gifts into my hands for us and for our next guest. And I really, it really moved me to see how much this show, this publication means to people all over the country and around the world. And to be there at this moment, it wasn't, it wasn't a festival, obviously. It was really a collective, I think, regrounding, and an effort to sharpen political principles, to re-energize very important campaigns that are being launched, and really to build this movement that is up against so much. But all I saw there were people motivated and in grief and in rage and wanting to do more. And I feel like the panels, the plenary sessions, these keynote speeches, of which Abubaker was part of, really helped give people the juice that they need to keep going and amplify these really important efforts. So it was an honor to be there.
Yeah. Well, I wasn't there, but I watched some of it, and I can agree. I mean, it was just really powerful speeches and panels, and a lot of it's on YouTube. I think Breakthrough News live streamed the whole conference, and all the sessions are up there. And I watched it actually from Ireland, which is where I was last week. And I just came back last night. I've got my pin. Where's my pin? There. And it was extraordinary to be in Ireland. And I had the same experience to meet people. We did an event, I'll say a bit more about that in a second, with Abubaker in Dublin, and people were coming up to us. They were talking about how much the Electronic Intifada means to us, how much this means to them, how much this live stream means to them. And it was really humbling. And it just, feeling that love gave me a new burst of energy to keep doing this work. So thank you to everyone. There's nothing like going out and meeting people, and it just meant the world to me. And I've got, in addition to my pin, I was given, let me see if I can show this. Can you see that? 𝐓𝐡𝐞, hope I'm saying that right. 𝐓𝐡𝐞 𝐄𝐥𝐜, pre-Palestine flag that has been in many demonstrations. You can see it's a bit faded because it's been in many demonstrations around Ireland. So I'm very pleased and honored to have that and be able to bring it back for the Electronic Intifada.
That's lovely. Yeah, I have a bunch of things that that I have to distribute to our colleagues. A lot of, I mean, people would come up to me and say, you know, thank you so much, and you know, you and Ali do such an incredible job, and then they'd say, but really, we love Jon Elmer, and that was kind of a common refrain throughout the weekend, and people were, I think, just really appreciative of the time that we give to analyze the Palestinian military resistance to this genocide. We don't sugarcoat it. We don't romanticize it. We, you know, Jon gives it, you know, its due analysis, and I think people really appreciate that. And so I was getting a lot. I mean, but everybody at the Electronic Intifada.
It was.
Shout out. It was lovely.
People definitely mentioned Jon's work to me many times, and of course we're going to see him in a little bit, his resistance report. But they mentioned each of us as if we're family, and we feel that. We really do feel that. So thank you, everyone. And I guess we have another member of the EI family with us today after a little absence, but
he's been very busy.
Been very busy, but why don't I introduce him then?
Please.
All right, very good. So just a reminder that you're watching the Electronic Intifada live stream, and I'm Ali Abu Naima here with my colleague Nora Barrows-Friedman. Earlier today, Palestinian journalist Abubaker Abed addressed the Gaza Tribunal in London. Let's look at a short clip of him talking about Israel's systematic killing of journalists and the failure of their international colleagues to rise up in solidarity.
We've been failed by international media organizations and the committees to protect journalists over the course of the past 2 years. We've been calling on them for a very long time, but our calls have been fallen in deaf ears and blind eyes, unfortunately. And the targeted assassination of journalists has been clear, as I told you, and the reason behind that is that Israel would put up any claims and then they will hunt down any journalist.
So that was just a brief clip of Abubaker, who is, of course, a journalist from Deir al-Balah refugee camp in Gaza. We're very proud to call him one of our close colleagues here at the Electronic Intifada, where he's contributed many stories, and we'll talk about a couple of them a bit later. Before the genocide, Abubaker was a university student in Gaza, but became a journalist during the genocide by necessity, driven to tell the stories of his people. That made him a target, subject to direct threats to his life and the life of his family. As well as reporting for Press TV, Abubaker has appeared frequently on the Electronic Intifada live stream, and his extraordinary words and reportage have touched so many of us very deeply. In April, Abubaker was evacuated to Ireland with a group of other students from Gaza to take up scholarships to complete their studies at Irish universities. Last week, 52 more students from Gaza arrived in Ireland to continue their studies, an enormous relief for them and a credit to the enormous efforts that people across Ireland have made to support Palestinians. But it's also a bitter and traumatic experience of having to leave their families behind in Gaza as Israel intensifies its openly declared extermination campaign. Since arriving in Ireland, Abubaker has only intensified his journalism and his educational and advocacy work on behalf of his people. In fact, as I just said, I just returned from Ireland last night, and Abubaker and I spoke together at that event organized by the Ireland-Palestine Solidarity Campaign in Dublin. There we are. And the sessions, actually, that event is, you can watch the videos on the Ireland-Palestine Solidarity Campaign YouTube channel. You can find them there. And of course, as Nora mentioned, over the weekend, Abubaker participated in the People's Conference for Palestine in Detroit remotely. There is so much to talk about with Abubaker, and we are so delighted to welcome him to the Electronic Intifada live stream from London. Hi, Abubaker.
Hi.
Hi, Abubaker.
I can't believe yesterday we were walking next to each other, and now we're separated by an ocean. But it's I've missed you already.
Marxist countries in the world.
Yeah, but it's really good to see you. And we just saw that clip of you speaking about the murder of Palestinian journalists at the Gaza Tribunal in London. One of the more than 240 journalists murdered by Israel is Rasmi Salem. He was killed in an Israeli airstrike on Gaza City on Tuesday, and I was actually with you in Dublin when you heard that news. Rasmi was your cameraman in Gaza. Tell us a little bit more about him.
Well, he was only 25 years old, so nearly my age. He was the cameraman at Press TV, and he also worked with other media outlets. During the genocide, he's been displaced since the outset of Israel's genocidal war on the
Abubaker, the sound cut out for a second, but you're back.
Okay.
I think it's back.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay, so he's been displaced since the outset of Israel's genocidal war on the Strip. So he's been living in tents, taking shelter in tents, and he's been working hour in, hour out. And I remember being with him all the time. He wasn't only just a cameraman, but he wasn't only a cameraman, but he always would drive us to the location of the reporting, to the pumped down scenes, and to different scenes where we were reporting. And he was such a kind person, always trying to make jokes, and he was always upbeat and hopeful that this genocide would end. He also wanted to get married after the genocide. All that he dreamt of is that he and his family would survive this Holocaust, and they would be together again, and they would rebuild their house. But then Israel killed him. He was staying up for very, very long hours at night, like sometimes after midnight. I remember that when I was reporting from Gaza City during the ceasefire. So most of his days would be very, very long and exhausting hours of work and reporting and doing much work for Gaza. And he never had a rest. He never had a rest at all. He would work relentlessly, tirelessly, in a way that no one in the world could do it. And he was just a simple human being, as everyone is in Gaza, and wanted to have a life, wanted to have a dream, wanted to have peace in his homeland. And he never lost that hope that he would survive the genocide, but unfortunately, he was just murdered. And this has really broken the hearts of so many people because he's worked with almost every journalist inside the BCH territory. So it's very heartbreaking.
Abubaker, I'm reminded of what our colleague and contributor Shahid Abu Salama said a couple weeks ago, that it's an open-ended funeral, that there's just a constant waves of grief and sadness, because people who community members, neighbors, friends, family, are all suffering and being hunted, especially the journalists. You're in constant touch with your family and friends in Gaza. What are you hearing about what they're facing right now, especially in your hometown of Deir Balah?
I think one of the things that is still striking me that I just heard yesterday was one of the people that I talked to, and they told me that our dream right now is to have a wall to sit against just inside the tent, because we really can't have a rest, we really can't stand against the wall. I think if human beings in this world have reached this level of suffering, we're no longer useful. I don't think we're useful as a human world at all. And hearing from my family on a very daily basis, talking to them about what they eat every day, and my mother being suffocated from the wood fire she cooks on every single day, and she says that, like, I can't continue doing that. So it's about the very basic necessities, and I always call Elul my 3-year-old niece, and she always cries for an egg, asks me for an egg, asks me for a bar of chocolate. I call her in the morning, and she's very boisterous, she's very happy, but children, she always asks her mother to ask me to bring her something from here, like a bar of chocolate or some snacks or some candies. But whenever her mother says that she and I can't do anything, she starts crying, and she even starts asking her mother about fighting back against this blockade and trying to lift it. This is the innocence of children. And another woman that I was in talk to, and I think I pointed it out to Dr. Ali when we were in Dublin, she's Besma. I'm still in constant talk with her, and she didn't want to leave Gaza City, although it's under eviction orders at the moment. So she stayed there, and the first day she said she wouldn't leave because displacement is more bitter and thorny and heartbreaking than being killed. But then she said that she wished her dad were with them. He was killed in one of the wars on Gaza, and then she said she wanted to leave. But yesterday I just received a voice note from her crying and begging me for help, begging me to help, and I'm trying to help her as much as I can. I'll do everything in my power, but she's really crying, and I can hear in the voice note in the background, I can hear the sounds of the shells, the sounds of the quadcopters above her head, and her groans and her very panicking sound is deeply, deeply traumatizing to hear. Everyone in Gaza has a tragedy to tell. Everyone in Gaza has a horror story. Gaza has turned into a horror film where people are watching, but they're not ready to act to stop it. So we're seeing in a totally different matter at the moment. But for the children, for everyone in Gaza, I can't even wrap my head around the fact that this is still ongoing and people are desperate for a piece of bread. And even I just heard from some people yesterday that they wanted to be starved rather than be displaced again. So for anyone, my family or whoever, it's beyond incomprehensible.
You and I mean you look healthy. You look finally you've gained back the weight, and this is really important. And I know a lot of people asked me at the conference, for example, like how you were doing, how's your medical condition, and so I want you to talk about that as much as you want to. But you arrived in Ireland in April as one of the students evacuated. You've told the story of how your mother begged you to leave because she feared that Israel would target you and kill your entire family. We see that you've been tireless in speaking up about the situation in Gaza. Tell us how you've been doing since you've been in Ireland, and what advice can you give to those 52 students who are just now arriving from Gaza?
I think I believe my heart has been bearing a lot of pain since I left. And as I just told you, once I was in Gaza, that the grave in Gaza is much better for me than the paradise of Europe. However, this is what Israel has forced upon us. I mean, my family told me last time that they didn't want to be war wounded. They would have preferred to be called all rather than be all war wounded and suffer more and more over the course of the next time or the next months or whatever. Holding up in such a situation, this is my first time traveling outside the Strip, is a very cumbersome and arduous journey. I'm trying to help people in Gaza to report in the situation, to provide Palestinian voices inside trapped in the territory at the moment, and speaking up as much as I can. And I'm now taking care of myself, cooking. My mum would help me normally before leaving Gaza. Being with your family would ease a lot of things, but now I am cooking, doing everyday chores. I'm speaking up. I'm talking to people in Gaza, trying to help them. I'm trying to take care of many things at the same time. I think for a 22-year-old, it looks like an impossibility. But what drives me to continue is I love my homeland. I want to do everything for it. I want to sacrifice for it, no matter what the cost is. And I'm sure my people are very reliant on me to amplify their voices outside. So that always is the speaking up no matter what. And that's why I've been probably relentless. I hope I've been doing something for my homeland, but we need our homeland to be free. We need the genocide to stop. So I just hope I'm doing something.
And in the time I spent with you, Abubaker, I could see that you are actually relentless all day long, talking to your family, talking to other people in Gaza. You receive lots of messages from people in Gaza, and you try to answer every one of them. I could see how busy you were, to the point where I was really urging you to take a break and rest. And I'm going to do that now in front of everyone who's watching, to really urge you to take care of yourself. And I'm not going to mention the names of any of the students who arrived, just because we want to respect their privacy and let them speak out in their own time if they want to. But you knew some of them, not many of them, but you knew some of them. And I could see that throughout their journey from Gaza, that very, very long journey from central Gaza to the Kerem Shalom crossing, through occupied Palestine, into Jordan, and then on, you were reassuring them, telling them what to expect, speaking with their families, reassuring their families. I saw you do that for these students, and that was very important, that you shared your experience and knowledge with them and helped to guide them through this process. So I just want to let's turn, if we can. If you want to say something more about that, you're welcome to. Yeah, go ahead.
I just really wanted to say that those students never wanted to leave Gaza. And I know people are desperate inside Gaza right now. And I know a lot of people may want to leave because they can't suffer anymore. However, I know a lot of people also, the vast majority of people who are very, very connected and rooted to the land, they want to continue, and they have pledged to themselves that they will never leave no matter what the circumstances are. I just talked to my colleague, I can say his name, Ahmed at the Brest of Unit, said to him, do you think of traveling outside? And he said, never ever discuss this with me. I'm not going to leave at all. And I wish I were as brave as him, but the conditions are always different. And for people who are right now in the West, you know, it's a horrible experience. It's a very agonizing decision that will keep haunting them for a very long time. But in the end, I just want to say that there has to be more from Ireland. There has to be more from the UK, from these like countries, because like we've been through a lot, and these countries have been accomplices to the genocide in Gaza. So they have to do the least they can, but also to share the pain of my people and of my fellow students and my compatriots is really important for me, because we have to share the pain together, vent it together, and we have to help together until we make sure we're doing something for Palestine, because the struggle will continue, and no matter what it takes, Palestine needs us, and Palestine will grow no matter what the cost is, even if it is our blood.
Mhm. We share that hope, and we're very glad. I know that it's something that tortures you and each and every person from Gaza, but we're very happy that you are safe in Ireland and that those students are safe. And we wish that safety for everyone. Everyone deserves that, and we're just very glad that you're there. Let's take a look, Abubaker, at some of this is only a small part of the work you've been doing, but you wrote a couple of stories for the Electronic Intifada recently. And let's start with the newest one, which focuses really on the situation of students. And actually, we wrote this together in Dublin, and it's the first time you and I have written an article together. So it was really something special for me. And it's the story of a prospective student who we call Haya, who is in Gaza, and Haya is her first name. She applied to a master's program in public health at the University of South Wales, and you can see the headline there, UK University, sorry for email, hinting at ban on Palestinian students. Give us just a brief outline of what happened here, Abubaker. You learned about this, you posted about it, and then we ended up writing the story. But what happened? Give us a brief sketch.
I think generally there is a lack of solidarity or understanding of the situation of Palestinian students in Gaza. And that lack of understanding and sympathy, which should be obligatory from other people across the globe, has led to other things, but sometimes it's deliberate. So I see a lot of students all the time, like asking me from Gaza, and they are trying to look for scholarships to get outside Gaza and continue their education, because for 3 consecutive years there hasn't been any education inside the Gaza Strip. So for Haya, when when I saw her email, I was really shocked and I was really appalled by the email. So I contacted her directly, and I asked her what happened with her. And she said she applied recently, hoping that she would get a scholarship and she would be evacuated by the UK government to join this university. Nonetheless, she was very appalled and very disappointed by the reply she got. And then she felt like she was an outcast. And then she told me like I couldn't even imagine it, and it was for me like very racist and very indiscriminate, something that she never imagined that she would really receive. So,
And just for those, Abubaker, just for those who aren't familiar with the details, she had sent an application to the University of South Wales, and she received a reply from the admissions office that said, "Thank you for your recent application. Regrettably, no applications from Palestine are being considered at this time. Therefore, your application has been withdrawn." And then she posted that on Twitter X, and then you reposted it, and it was seen millions of times. Actually, there were millions of views and a lot of outrage. And then we contacted the university. We wrote to the University of South Wales, and they, after we contacted them, they wrote to Haya and they told her it had all been a mistake and that they had mischaracterized her application as being for 2025 when it was actually for 2026. And they'd reinstated it, and they were now going to consider it. And they said, "We don't have any policy against Palestinian students." So they backed down in the face of this outrage. And exactly what happened, we can't attribute a motive to them. It might have been some mischief, but it may well have been a really unfortunate mistake. And then they did apologize publicly, just as we detail in the story. But talk about really what it means. Suppose a university in the UK or somewhere else in Europe accepts a student from Gaza. I mean, they're not just going to be able to go, right?
Yeah, because I think because I remember when I was in London last time, I talked to one of the secretaries of the MPs, and she told me that the reasons behind that are two. First, there is a lot of pressure by the Zionist groups on the UK government to accept Palestinians overall from Gaza under the pretext that they are seen as terrorists. And the second reason is that the UK government makes up an excuse that the biometric examination cannot be done in Gaza, and that's why we can't get them out if they don't have a biometric examination. And the fact is that the UK government or the UK embassy in Gaza office has been destroyed, so they can't do it at all. And the UK government is aware of that, but until now, we haven't seen no change. We have seen no change from the UK government, but recently, I think they started to accept more of the situation. And as far as as far as I'm aware, there will be an evacuation for those 40 Palestinian students from the UK into Gaza after pressure from groups, because, well, I've been told by the secretary that there have been many emails in the inbox of the government has been flooded by many emails from the MPs and from outside the parliament urging them to accept Palestinians, specifically Palestinian children who have been injured by Israel under the auspices of the UK government.
Can you also talk about a story that you wrote headlined BBC Guidelines Endanger and Offend Gaza Interviewees? You've been speaking to young people in Gaza who were contacted by the BBC to give interviews, and you write about one in particular called Lamis. It's not her real name. What happened with her and some of the other people you write about in this story, and what does it say about the nature of Western legacy corporate media, or Western state-run media, as the BBC is?
These three people are not the only ones. The BBC has done this with many interviewees in Gaza. So as a condition to accept interviewing them, they would ask them these questions: do you have any political affiliations, or do you support Hamas? And the BBC, I think these guidelines have been updated after taking down Gaza, how to live, how to survive a war zone for Palestinian children, after a lot of the pressure from Abdullah al-Yazuri. He's a son of an agricultural minister, and the government in Gaza.
And that was the BBC documentary that the BBC
was pulled out.
Pulled after pressure from Zionist groups, because it featured a child whose father they claimed is affiliated with Hamas. A child, a 13-year-old child, I think it was.
Yeah, but Hamas is a government in there.
Yeah,
so-
it was his father was like, some sort of like public works. I mean,
Yeah,
he's
but a
the
child
police-
is a
yeah,
child.
exactly.
No matter
That's
who
it.
his father was, the
Exactly.
child is just a child.
Experiencing a genocide.
Yeah.
Definitely, but this is like the brutality of Israel and the Zionist groups all across the globe. And unfortunately, everything like for the Western media, because we've mentioned it, the BBC will never ever ask Israelis if they or their parents have participated in genocide. They will never ask Israelis if they belong to the Likud or Shas parties in Israel. They will never ask them these questions. But the BBC will keep platforming them, and we have seen Western media, including Channel 4, which was at the tribunal today, along with Sky News and along with other media outlets in the UK, which are very complicit in the genocide. So you would see them platforming even extremists, even ICC warranted ministers, and you would see, sorry, so you would see like the former formed, and it seems for me like they will never, like they will say that we are neutral and this is a two sides war, but in their stories we'd see that the Israeli military says, but they will never see or write Hamas says. So it's not a two sides war for them, but they are masquerading as impartial reporters, which is untrue. Western media legacies, no, they will be inshallah in the museum, the genocide museum, where all of them will be prosecuted at the best court possible, and they have to pay for the war crimes they have justified and they have laundered over the course of the past 2 years. And unfortunately, until now, they haven't even changed. They are still perpetuating this genocide. They are still regurgitating and parroting Israel's lies because simply they are cheap sellouts. They're ready to sell their humanity for a few pounds, and that's how they are. That's what the Western world has been about. Like I walked around here, I'm seeing a lot of buildings draped by Ukrainian flags, but you would never see a Palestinian flag next to it. You would never see that at all. This can tell you the double standards and the hypocrisy and sycophancy of the Western world. And instead, like there is another point about Western media. Whenever an Israeli minister would open up on genocide or rhetoric or speak up about genocide and even support it, they will never report it. But imagine if a Palestinian would say that, it would be everywhere on every headline. So we have to hold them accountable, and we have to do that. We must do that.
And your story did do that because it contains actual screenshots of the WhatsApp chats between BBC producers subjecting young people in Gaza to this political screening, these political litmus tests to decide whether or not they might be allowed to be interviewed. And of course, as you said, we've never seen any sense that the BBC subjects Israelis to the same kind of political screening and testing. And that shows really the built-in bias of the BBC, which has really just become a mouthpiece for the British government and the Zionist movement. So it's an extraordinary piece of journalism, and one really that I think only someone like you could have done with the insights and experience that you have. So we were very proud to publish it at the Electronic Intifada, Abubaker.
And I'm very proud to be a part of you. And as I just showed you the clip today, so they talked about those media outlets supporting Palestinian journalists, and the first one is you that I mentioned.
You did send me that. You did send me that. I don't know if we're able.
Play it. I can.
Maybe Tamara can play it. I didn't give it to before. Oh well, here we go.
Unfortunately, only the independent media outlets that are very supportive of journalists in Gaza. I work with the Electronic Intifada and Dropside News, which are independent media outlets in the US, and they're very supportive of journalists inside Gaza.
Yeah. Well, Thank you for that, Abubaker. We're really honored. And I think in the longer clip, Jeremy Corbyn was sitting right next to you, right? Or he was there.
No, he was in on the other panel.
I see. Okay, I'm mixing it up because I saw it earlier. But anyway, I hope he heard that because
he asked me this question.
He asked you that question.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's good. So I'm glad a lot of people heard you today in London, and I know you're going to keep speaking out through all the means you have. You are so prolific in your writing, doing interviews, in speaking around Ireland, and you've been in the UK, and you're going to keep doing it. But please, Abubaker, on behalf of all of us, take care of yourself, get plenty of rest, and stay strong. We love you very much, and the Electronic Intifada is your home, so come back anytime. We're always here for you.
Thank you so much.
When do you start classes? Soon, right?
I actually don't know.
Yeah.
Well, we can't wait to hear. It's going to be...
But plenty, I just wanted to say the plenty of rest is seeing you and seeing the great people of the Electronic Intifada, and thank you so much for what you're doing, and I'm so honored and proud to represent you wherever I go, and I wish I would be doing it weren't under such circumstances, and maybe one day, and I believe in that, we would report on a free Palestine, inshallah, and that's going to be the case and the end of this Holocaust. But thanks, really big thanks to the audience behind the screens, and I mean, you're the hope. All of us must carry that hope until we're making the history with that hope. So we need to continue doing what we're doing, and thank you so much, and thanks for pushing me to work. You needed me to rest, but you pushed me for work in Ireland.
Oh my goodness. Both
Classic
work and
Al.
rest in good balance. Work and rest in good balance, but you're doing an extraordinary job. We're very proud of you.
Next time, inshallah, from New York, I'll join you. Now 3 cities. Next time from New York.
We'll talk about that.
Okay. Thank you so much.
All right. Take care, Abubaker. Take care. We'll talk to you soon. And thank you.
Bye. All the best. Love and hope for you.
Bye. Oh. He's like our son.
Yeah, I mean, he's just he's extraordinary. He works very hard. He doesn't take much rest, even though we encourage him, and he feels driven to do this, and he feels a responsibility, and he's doing great, extraordinary work.
He is. And I mean, that responsibility is massive. He's now a representative of his family and his community to the outside world, and I'm so grateful that he's safe, and that he's doing better physically, physiologically after everything that he's been through, and I know that it's going to be a really, really long journey for him, psychologically.
For everyone who comes out of Gaza,
Absolutely.
I can tell you I've talked to many people who, like Abubaker, have come out of Gaza, and you can be, as an individual, physically safe, and that's a lot, aside from the trauma everyone continues to experience, but you can be safe, but you are constantly thinking about your family and your loved ones back home amid a worsening situation. So our heart goes out, our love and our support to every single person with family in Gaza, who is, just minute by minute in fear for their loved ones.
Yeah. I'm so glad we got him. Let's bring Jon on. Hey, Jon.
Hey, guys. That was great to see Abubaker.
Yeah.
And I just second the amazing work that he's been doing, and how devastating it must be.
Yeah.
To be outside, and he said it, and yeah, we're glad he's safe.
Yeah.
We know he's going through
surreal.
Yeah. Difficult moment.
Yeah. Well, there have been some difficult moments for the Israeli military in the last couple of weeks since the last resistance report, John. And Yemen has also been kicking it up a little bit. Give us a thumbnail of what you're going to be talking about today.
Well, we're on the eve of the Battle of Gaza City, the second Battle of Gaza City. And the destruction right now is focused in the south on 𝐓𝐡𝐞 neighborhood. And in the past couple of weeks, we got resistance videos from two operations that were pretty high profile operations, but we had a little bit of Israeli video that's coming. There's a bunch of leaks happening in Israel right now with there's a bit of discord within their forces, not about the genocide. They're all for the genocide, but about these ground battles where soldiers have to actually be soldiers. They're not super into it. They are very into the genocide, though.
Yeah.
But we saw these operations, and I'll break them down and set people up for what we can expect in the coming weeks as the attack on Gaza City appears inevitable at this point.
Yeah, I mean, like we were talking about in the news report, it's they're using all of these robots that you've been talking about for weeks now, these like remote controlled vehicles to just vaporize entire city blocks.
Yeah, because they're too scared to go in and do even the most basic military work. So they send these American gifted armored personnel carriers packed with explosives. And
it's depraved.
Instead of sending soldiers. So,
right. All right. Well, John, take it away.
Take it away. All right. So you are watching and listening to Electronic Intifada. I am Jon Elmer. This is the Resistance Report for day 699 of Israel's genocidal war on Gaza. I am reporting this on the 4th of September. Let's begin with the maps. As always, I will be breaking down the Beit Hanun ambush coming up. 𝐓𝐡𝐞 released footage from the ground of that operation that I had reported on in early July, and we had only had thermal imaging camera footage of that from the Israelis. So stay tuned for that. But let's first understand the context of the battle as it stands right now. And these are the United Nations Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs maps that I've been using for the last few months. You can see 86.5% is a shoot-to-kill zone in Gaza. And this is going to be an issue as the evacuation from Gaza City, the million people that live in Gaza City. Some portion of them are expected to leave Gaza City. A significant portion are expected to remain in Gaza City, but they're being driven out of Gaza City and told to go to areas in the south. But as you can see from this map very clearly, the areas are already full. The white areas on the bottom, towards the bottom of the map, is Al-Mawasi. That is the tent camp that's lined up on the sand dunes. It has no infrastructure, and there's hundreds of thousands of people there. Deir al-Balah has been packed throughout the war. There's not room for people in Deir al-Balah, and so the Israeli military hasn't formally issued the evacuation order for Gaza City, but the preliminary maps show that the Israeli military expects people to go to areas in the south that are covered by those shoot-to-kill zones, that are in those areas that you can see that are under shoot-to-kill, which is separate, as I keep saying, and I want to make sure that everyone is very clear on this. That purple is not area controlled by the Israeli military. We know that. We know that in Khan Yunis, there's a number of pockets in Khan Yunis that the Israelis never took over, particularly in eastern Khan Yunis. But we do know that Rafah is that way. You can see at the bottom of the map, and that map shows the corridor the Morag corridor there. But yeah, just to say, these are not areas that Israel controls. These are areas where they shoot to kill anything that moves in that area from a distance, firing at them with heavy machine guns, with tank fire, and that's where the aid massacres exist as well, in those shoot to kill zones. So this week, the Israelis have begun the call up of their reserves. The first reserves began earlier this week. The number is supposed to end up around 60 to 80,000, although the Israelis are being really slippery with these numbers because they know a lot of people, a lot of reserves are not going to report at this point. And the Israeli military has had to redeploy. They're going to deploy the reservists that are called up into the West Bank, into the on the northern border with Lebanon, on the eastern border with Jordan, and they're going to send the standing army, who are in those places I just mentioned, into Gaza. So the conscription army goes into Gaza. The reservists stay out as much as possible because it is a very unpopular war at this point in Israel. The genocide is not unpopular, is nearly universal support for the genocide in Gaza, but the Israelis don't want to fight in this war, and that goes all the way to the top of their leadership, the active chiefs of the Mossad, which is the external security, Shabak, internal security, Amman is military intelligence. Those chiefs and others are all, including the IDF chief of staff, are against the Gaza City invasion. They believe that the 60-day ceasefire that Hamas had on the table for the past month, which was Netanyahu's proposal a month ago, and then he pulled it back off the table playing games because he wants the war to continue. Netanyahu believes if the war ends, that he will be elected out of office and will go to jail for his corruption charges. So there's still a lot to be determined about the exact way the forces are going to be used in Gaza. The resistance has been able to prepare for this battle for more than a year because the first battle of Gaza City ended in early 2024. There was a poll in Mariv newspaper this week that sort of underscored all this, that only 25% of Israelis, Jewish Israelis polled, believe that Israel is winning the war. About 20% believe that 𝐓𝐡𝐞 is winning the war. So we know how this is going. The defense minister said that Gaza City will become like Rafah and Beit Hanun. Both areas have been virtually wiped out. And so this genocidal intent by the Israelis is consistent now for 699 days. And also because of the lack of the military's lack of interest in fighting this battle, they have a draft dodgers issue. 𝐓𝐡𝐞 𝐄𝐿 reported this week that the army and the police will be reinforced not only at Ben Gurion Airport, but also near maritime and land border crossings, looking for draft dodgers who are trying to flee the country. So something to take note of there. So the next map you could see, this is the Israeli version of the map, which you can see is completely different than that the United Nations Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs map. Still, this is too generous to the Israeli military. They do not control large pockets of Khan Yunis, including the camp and the downtown of Khan Yunis are not controlled by the Israelis. There's pockets towards the east, Abasan al-Kabira, that they do not control. Those were where we saw the bulk of the operations that made June and July the deadliest months for the Israelis in the past year. So this map was posted. You could see the two Hebrew written terms there are the corridors. The bottom one is the Morag corridor, which I broke down on a previous show, and the Magan Os corridor is the one that cuts Khan Yunis there from the eastern to the western. Khan Yunis is split in half, and we know they don't control that corridor because on the show, on our last show 2 weeks ago, I told you about an operation, a 20-strong Qassam commando raid breaching operation, tunnel-borne breaching operation against the Israeli position in the Magan Oz corridor. So they don't control that. But when they published this map, they bragged about 10,000 airstrikes during Gideon's Chariots Part 1. And the Gaza Health Ministry said more than 10,000 people were killed during that time. Israel's trying to say that they have 75% control over the Gaza Strip, but they don't. Those dotted lines that you see, those are buffer zones, and those are the buffer zones that Israel is trying to make permanent. But the resistance has attacked them in those buffer zones. And we're going to see later on in the show, the attack in Beit Hanun is in that buffer zone where you see that dotted line on the far right side of the map on the eastern edge. So the bottom right corner of that map, that's Beit Hanun, and that area was the staging area for this pretty remarkable ambush of Israeli troops. Army radio reported yesterday that the IDF admits yesterday morning that after nearly 2 years of war, there is, quote, enormous wear and tear on manpower and equipment. The IDF will enter Operation Gideon's Chariots B with only 60 to 70% readiness of the heavy bulldozers for the engineering missions. During the war, dozens of heavy bulldozers were damaged by anti-tank missiles and charges and were completely taken out of service. This is actually the first time we've even had dozens be mentioned. It's obviously way higher than dozens, but this is information that is covered by the Israeli military censor. We don't hear how many tanks, bulldozers, armored personnel carriers are taken out of service. So this was the closest we have gotten, and they say 60 to 70% readiness. So they're suggesting that somewhere around 40% of their armored bulldozers have been taken out of the battle, which is consistent with 699 days of resistance reports, where we cover that extensively. This next slide is this was another leak. This is a leak by Channel 12, but this was an IDF leak. This is a booklet of lessons learned from Gideon's Chariots Part 1, Part A. They haven't clarified if it's A or 1. B or 2, but we'll see in the coming days. Distributed this booklet to all ground forces, and it was given to every training officer in the Israeli military. Every ground force maneuvering division was given this report, and it says, what you see on the screen there says, Gideon's Chariots failed. It didn't defeat 𝐓𝐡𝐞 or the Hamas government. It didn't free captives. Quote, made every mistake possible, gave the enemy resources. They fought a war of attrition without parameters or a timeline. They poorly handled 𝐓𝐡𝐞's guerrilla warfare. But yeah, I think the takeaway point is every possible mistake was made in this battle that the IDF themselves admit they lost. And Haaretz pointed out that among the other shortcomings cited was that troops redeployed to areas where they had previously operated, and IDF combat methods had proved ill-suited to counter Hamas's guerrilla tactics. Now, this is something I've been pointing out on the show since day one. They arrived at the areas that they thought that they had previously taken operational control over, and they thought no one would be there. But as we know, the territorial battalions remain in those areas. So when the Israelis went back into eastern Khan Yunis to Abasan al-Kabira, they were immediately hit by the Abasan al-Kabira battalion of the Qassam brigades. And those surprises come from a fundamental misunderstanding of the Israeli military, of the way that the Palestinians fight and the way that they're organized. And I think that that was a remarkable note to pull out of this leaked document. Again, another leaked document. We went 630 days without a leaked document or video. And then in the past 2 months, we get leaks multiple times a week. So it's been interesting to see that internal fight within the Israeli military and political echelon, giving us access to these documents that we previously wouldn't see. So the next slide, let's move to the northern Gaza, because that's where the focus of this show is, and the war is right now. Zaytun neighborhood, you can see that in the southeast of Gaza City, the Shujaiya neighborhood and Tufa, Both of those areas to the east of Gaza City were part of Gideon's Chariots 1, and they have massive destruction, near total elimination of eastern Shujaiya and Tufa as well. Beit Hanun virtually wiped off the map, looks like a moonscape. Really, we're talking like post-apocalyptic looking areas in the north of Gaza, all over Gaza, but the north of Gaza in particular. Civil Defense reported the other day that in an 18-day span, 1,000 buildings were destroyed in the Zaytun neighborhood and the neighboring neighborhood of Al Sabra, which is just to the north of Zaytun, essentially the same neighborhood, connected to the same neighborhood. And we saw in Zaytun, as soon as the Israelis went in, we saw that multi-stage ambush by the Nukba elite special forces of the Qassam brigades that I broke down last show. So they were ready for them in Zaytun. And also earlier this week, the Army radio reported and the IDF reported that 7 IDF fighters were injured overnight in a armored personnel carrier that was hit by a IED. So again, just proof that these Qassam operations and munitions are continually penetrating these vehicles. They're inside the cabin, and 7 soldiers were wounded. Sounds like they got lucky. 7 soldiers wounded when a blast penetrates inside the cabin. Can be far more costly than that, as we know, throughout the war. The war began on the second day of the war. Qassam, with a Yasin 105, penetrated the back of an armored troop carrier and killed everybody on board. And it's happened a number of times throughout the war. Let's take a look at number 5, because you can see what's happened to Zaytun here. These are satellite images that cover these two. So August is 8th is what you're seeing right now. For people listening, we look at a map here that looks, there's a lot of damage, but it looks like a city. You can make out a city in this August 8th satellite image from the New York Times, from Planet, from the satellite. And then if we flip it to August 25th, it looks like somebody took a massive eraser to it. It's just ashen gray and totally destroyed for like, what is that? 4 or 6 city blocks in a row, just completely wiped out in that period of time, 17 days. So you can see the destruction that's happening. They're not willing to fight the resistance. They want to draft dodge. They want to flee the country, but they have no problem executing this genocide. As Nora always points out in the newscast, if you didn't catch that today, you should go back and listen to her newscast covering the humanitarian impacts of this war. Okay, let's take a look at number 6B here. We have a 𝐓𝐡𝐞 𝐄𝐥𝐞𝐜 joint operation, a good look of tunnel and tunnel formation. You can see the fold in the wall, those turns. Those are what makes the tunnels effective. They're not just straight lines. They're not like a subway line. And here on the wall, you see, you see them there. That's an Eitan wheeled armored personnel carrier coming down the hill. They're going to show you a tank on the left there and the Eitan on the right of the screen. And they're going to fire a Kornet anti-tank guided missile system at this Eitan armored vehicle. There's a poem on the wall on the side I just want to point out. It is a poem from a 12th century Iraqi poet that talks about the nature of keeping prisoners. And it says, when we held power, mercy was our way. When you held power, blood spilled. You deemed it permissible for prisoners to be killed, while we showed mercy again and again. Let this mark the divide between us. That's what 𝐓𝐡𝐞 has put up on the wall, handwritten poem from the 12th century to point out at this moment in time, as Palestinian prisoners are being killed in captivity, and while Israeli prisoners in Gaza are big in the news in Israel, that they put those little notices. And we've seen this all throughout the war, where the individual units will put those kind of little marks. We've seen Qassam reading books at various stages that are meant to be significant. We've seen graffiti on the walls of the shot where the fighters give their chance to speak to the world. And every time they do it, invariably, it's eloquent. It's usually deeply rooted in history and in Palestinian struggle, and it's topical. It's about what's happening at the moment today. So that poem about prisoners is very salient message at this moment in time. So that is the strike on the 𝐓𝐻𝐿, and they believes that they've hit the 𝐓𝐻𝐿. That's what's burning there, and that's the medevac helicopter. We couldn't get any closer look at that 𝐓𝐻𝐿. When the war started, I told you that they were going to use these 𝐓𝐻𝐿s. I expected they would be used much more than they have been used. We saw them in Rafah during the Battle of Rafah, and we've seen them in the buffer zones. We've seen them be hit by Cornets a couple of times in the buffer zone areas, but they haven't been deep into Palestinian territory in those 𝐓𝐻𝐿 armored vehicles. They are wheeled vehicles that made their debut on the battlefield on October 7th. They rushed them into service. But it's interesting because they must believe that the Shuad and the Yasin are damaging to those vehicles. That's the only supposition about why they're not using them more in Gaza. So a direct hit. So let's take a look here at number 7. Number 7. This is an elementary girls' school in southern Gaza City. You can see the Israelis are using it as a position. 𝐓𝐡𝐞 pointing that out. You can see the dust because that's a tank driving in there. You can see the Merkava there in the bottom left. For people who are listening, you're looking at a school building surrounded by destruction, which is all around it. There's a D9 armored bulldozer driving by. So you can clearly see that it's a position within the school. 𝐓𝐡𝐞's artillery teams here using 60 millimeter mortars that Qassam and Saraya build in Gaza. They also capture these, and they've also smuggled these, but they also build them. And we're going to watch this artillery unit land artillery inside the school enclosure where we see the tanks operating here. So I show you this one because we can see where the mortars land, and again, right inside the base. So perfect aim with that. And the Saraya fighter says, "We deliver a clear message that must be said from the heart of the battlefield to the enemy who continues to threaten and launch new operations. You have named this latest one Gideon's Chariots 2. We remind you that of the defeat that you suffered in Gideon's Chariots 1 will be the same again, only greater, God willing. You launched an operation called Gideon's Chariots 2, and we begin, by God, to repel it." So they are ready for Gideon's Chariots 2, and they're obviously always very on top of the moment of the news. And we see them sometimes, these fighters, they put the date that the operation took place, they send a message to a martyr, and they're always very up to date on the information. So these fighters in their positions are well connected to what's going on. In military terms, that's called command and control. It's what the Israelis did not have on October 7th, and the reason for the collapse of their forces on October 7th. Qassam dismantled their command and control. So yes, this is, you'll see here, watch the rounds land. Most of these mortar videos, we don't see where they land, but here is a perfect shot multiple times right inside the campus. So these are direct hits, and if a mortar is a direct hit, it's a fragmentation an area weapon, so it sprays the whole area. So that's this is an elementary girls' school. Let's look at the next slide, number 8 here. You can see, so this started circulating about 6 days later on social media. This circulated, and BBC verified it. They verified that this is an army base. That was what BBC verified, put their mind to. It's pretty obviously a military base. I don't think anybody would say it's anything but. If you're listening to this, there's 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12. There's 24 armored vehicles, and in the top there's another half dozen engineering vehicles, and they're using the school as a military base. We've seen this all through the war, schools, hospitals be used as military bases. And then yesterday, if we go to slide number 9, we've also seen them do this throughout the war. They left the base and they destroyed it. They blew it up. They blew up the school. The elementary girls' school is now virtually vaporized by wiring it on the ground with explosives, and they just wipe it out. So that's the genocide part of this military battle, and they do it with glee, with TikTok videos. But yeah, devastating a school. So number 10, just wanted to bring in, this is the Democratic Front for the Liberation of Palestine, the DFLP, the National Resistance Brigades. Just wanted to bring them in to show you. They are using here these TC6 mines. They're not anti-tank mines. 𝐓𝐡𝐞 used these on October 7th for vehicles. They put them in place of like Jeeps, and they use them at intersections. And you can see him screwing on the top there. That's the pressure plate that he's screwing on at the top. So these are they don't require an external pressure plate. So the DFLP is setting this up. The Martyr Omar Al-Qassam Brigade is also their name, the National Resistance Brigades. And you can see them moving in, put it into position. They don't have camera on the operation, but you can see here that it looks like they're packing it up right on the edge where the Israelis would bulldoze. And so the bulldozer would hit that. And it's not a single mine. You can see how they've stacked them together. So just a chance to get the DFLP operations in there. They're in here every week carrying out mortar operations. So they're on the battlefield still. All the groups are still on the battlefield. This next one, this is an operation that came from 𝐓𝐿𝐿 that was released while we were away. This is an operation from July the 7th. This is 𝐓𝐿𝐿 𝐄𝐿 and the 𝐶ASSAM brigades in a joint operation. This commander here says we prepared a complex ambush between 𝐓𝐿𝐿 𝐄𝐿 and the 𝐶ASSAM brigades in the area with pre-planted explosive devices. After detonating these explosives, the remaining vehicles that come to the reinforcements, you can see him doing marking it on the paper where the reinforcements will come from, and 𝐶ASSAM and 𝐓𝐿𝐿 both predict the route that the reinforcements will come very well, and that's why these operations work, because there's multiple layers that go into these operations. They're not just randomly placed. And the interesting thing about this operation is that it's a joint operation. You can see the fighter there moving with the EFPs. They plant one 𝐓𝐿𝐿, which is 𝐶ASSAM's explosively formed penetrator, and they also plant one 𝐶𝐞, which is 𝐓𝐿𝐿 𝐄𝐿's explosively formed projectile. And you can see them burying it here with their pressure plates. And this fighter says, there's warplanes above us, there's soldiers in front of us in their tanks, and we have overcome all this with the help of God, and we are now preparing a second explosive device in this pure sand of Gaza. So there's, and if you can always find these videos on my Twitter feed. My Twitter feed is just an archive of these videos, but you can hear the drones. You can hear the drones flying over, and here they're indicating where the tank is driving. You can see it there. It hits and knocks the camera out of the cameraman's hands. So clearly a good explosive device. And they're going to hit another one. And here you see the fighter loading up the Tandem 85. This is 𝐓𝐿𝐿 𝐄𝐿's primary anti-tank weapon. And he's going to head out and hit the tank on the reinforcement path that they predicted. And there he is, just as was predicted. So a well-organized operation in 𝐓𝐿𝐿. During the destruction of 𝐓𝐿𝐿, the resistance is continuous in all of these areas. And here the fighters climbing through the window, returning to their base safely. Again, interesting to note the way that they're traveling outside with the blankets. We can look at number 12. They travel outside with the blankets like that so that their form doesn't get picked up by AI. We've seen them use a bunch of different ways to cover themselves. But so now we're going to focus on the Beit Hanun battalion and the Beit Hanun ambush. This was on July 7th. It took place. Beit Hanun, you see it in the upper right there of the map. And you see the Erez checkpoint, the exit from Gaza that has been closed for effectively closed to Palestinians for 20 plus years. So it's a very symbolic target. It was a target on October 7th, very symbolically. And the Beit Hanun battalion, who have been told that they have been beaten, they were told they were beaten in November 2023. And we know that they have come with many operations, which we can see in this next clip here. They put a little sizzle reel together of their operations, number 13 here, and you'll recognize some of them. I had to pull out a couple of the sniper hits, but that was the two kills with one shot. These were the massive IEDs during the general's plan that flipped the tank, that tossed the turret off the Merkava tank and separated it. There you see the destroyed vehicles. And this was the ambush that started during when Israel went back to war. And this was the tunnel-borne ambush that hit them in the buffer zone when Israel was not expecting it, and flipped over that Jeep. Could have been a captured soldier in that situation, but the fighters returned to their base safely. You can see coming up here the turret toss, the medevac helicopters not being targeted, all of the destroyed gear. So the Beit Hanun battalion is announcing its presence here with these operations. And on this reel, they have Hussein Fayyad Abu Hamza, the Beit Hanun battalion commander. They have his quote on there that he said when he emerged after Israel said that they killed him, and he emerged in the ceasefire alive and walking around with no entourage, walking around his community and meeting people who came home during the January ceasefire. So that was a potent little introduction to this operation that was, according to Israel's numbers, there was more than 20 casualties in this Beit Hanun ambush. So let's take a look at that. That's number 14. So you're going to see it's targeting the Netzah Yehuda battalion. They are the ultra-Orthodox battalion, and they have been targeted previously. This operation was the 7th of July, the same day as that operation in Shujaiya that I just showed you. There's the Netzah Yehuda battalion. They have been hit many times. They were the victims of the double sniper hit. They were the victims of the hit early on when the soldier went feet to the sky through the tank hatch. This is showing where the bombs are planted and where the Erez crossing is. So we're talking right in the buffer zone area underneath. That's an Israeli watch post up there. They have multiple positions along here. So these are under the nose of the Israelis. You're going to see them, the Israeli soldiers here, just doing everything wrong. That was just them spraying ammunition randomly. And it happened that there was a camera beside it. So there's random spray. And look at them all bunched up here, which is not how you should be moving through a battle space. They had just arrived into Gaza 1 hour before. So they're on foot. They had just arrived. They're all bunched up here. And they're about to get hit by a television IED, which is essentially a massive claymore mine that 𝐓𝐡𝐞 built, 𝐓𝐡𝐞 weapon. You can see it here. It detonates. They use the topography of the land. Presumably they use tunnels as well, but they use the topography of the land. And then here is the footage that we saw right away on July 7th. This is the footage from a thermal camera from the IDF that shows the total chaos. And the IDF has no idea what's going on in this operation. In their field report investigation, they said that there was 10 𝐓𝐡𝐞 fighters shooting at them. There was no 𝐓𝐡𝐞 fighters shooting at them. They're both IEDs planted on the route, detonated at the right moment. They were planted 12 hours before this foot patrol came in. For 4 days before that, the military bombs, destroys, airstrikes the area and destroys everything, and they think that there's no fighters in the area. So once that's completed, the 𝐓𝐡𝐞 fighters move forward, plant the explosives, and the Netzah Yehuda battalion, who just show up on the Gaza border, they walk on foot into this, and they walk into a double strike that hits the reinforcements that go to the area. And this is just remarkable because they tie in there's the second blast, and they'll tie in here the footage from the Israeli thermal camera, which is behind the hill that we can't see. Apparently, according to the 𝐄𝐐𝐞 commander, there was a third. See, there it is. There's the thermal camera, and that is behind the hill. So they're actually, the way that the videographer, or the way that they've put this video together, actually shows you through the hill that you can't see by, but that's what's going on through that hill. So again, the media ops wing of 𝐓𝐡𝐞 doing yeoman's work throughout this war to show us this story. And it's remarkable just how this whole incident took 90 minutes. The Israelis had no idea. They talked about, and then in that last scene, it says not over yet. So that is the Beit Hanun battalion saying, after killing and wounding 20 Israeli soldiers, that the battle in Beit Hanun is not over yet. So that is a remarkable operation. Significant number of casualties on the Israeli side, and they pointed that out. It was one of the largest single events for casualties throughout the war. 5 killed and 14 seriously or moderately wounded in that operation. And just finally, we have here a 𝐓𝐡𝐞 poster released the other day that says, "Gaza, the last fortress, stands tall with its people. You'll sooner reach the stars than see Gaza surrender." So that is the resistance report for day 699 of Israel's genocidal war, war on children, basically, as Nora pointed out earlier in the show.
Thanks so much for that, Jon. Just, I mean, those aerial shots of different parts of northern Gaza and Gaza City, but as you were pointing out, Beit Hanun. I mean, you know, I remember early on in the genocide, nearly 2 years ago, you were saying that the fighters were able to use these enormous piles of rubble in order to, you know, set up ambushes. Is that still happening? And what is, I mean, the level of destruction is just...
Yeah, the level of destruction is just total. It makes, I mean, I think early in the war, the question was, Israel was saying that they were going to destroy the tunnels, right? Yeah. And then the point of that was, if you drop all the buildings, which they were doing, you're just dropping the buildings on top of the tunnel entrances. They're never going to find the tunnels through that way. If you erase every single building in the entire town of Beit Hanun, it makes it very difficult to fight because there's nowhere for you to take cover. Yeah. Everything is destroyed. It's difficult to climb. It's difficult for the soldiers as well. Like, one of the things that I didn't actually cover was that the Israeli soldiers are concerned about Gaza City because everything around Gaza City is destroyed, like, completely. And then Gaza City itself is like 80% destroyed. So the rubble makes it difficult for the Israelis to fight as well. But the main advantage that the Palestinians have is the tunnel network. And the tunnel network has not been defeated. It hasn't even really been disrupted. There was some military numbers from last week that they were attacked during Gideon's chariots 10 times from tunnels that had previously thought to have been destroyed. So the tunnel network in Gaza City is significant. And I think that the battle in Gaza City is going to be a many month battle. And it's going to be destructive and genocidal, and it's a scary moment in this war that has been horrifying to watch. Another scary moment is approaching.
Also, you know, just a note about the translations and the poetry that was done. I know that Tamara also helped with some of that. Can you talk a little bit about just the use of these like poetic, historically poetic. I mean, something from the 11th century.
That was a good find by Tamara.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's amazing, and it's an amazing part of this story. The individuality of the fighters, all of them they get a moment throughout the war to make some kind of statement. And they basically do in every video. There's some kind of something in every video that you can point out that 𝐓𝐡𝐞 puts there on purpose. Israel 𝐓𝐡𝐞 as well puts there on purpose. And it's even that poem that was only in it for a fraction of a second. It was difficult to actually even capture what was on the paper because of how short it was on the screen for. But it's just shows their link to and their awareness. That one particular about prisoners at this moment in time. It was just a remarkable statement, and it's been happening throughout the war. And I think it's going to be part of the story that is told about this battle. But it talks to people. It talks to the people, and it shows the connection to the history. It shows these people are deeply rooted in the communities that they're fighting in, and they're not going anywhere. They're going to fight. They're going to fight to the end. There's not going to be a surrender in Gaza. We've been saying that all along, but it's true. There's not going to be a surrender in Gaza.
And again, thanks to Tamara for translating. It's she's also an accomplished poet herself, so
yes,
we're really lucky to have her abilities
Published
in many
poet.
forms. Yeah, absolutely.
So
right.
many talents here at the Electronic Intifada.
We're very lucky. So let's turn to some of the kind of more newsy items from the West that are accomplices in this genocide, including this like new iteration of some like AI driven. I mean, it's so dystopian. It's like, I mean, I have 𝐓𝐡𝐞 𝐄𝐥𝐞 novels behind me that I mean, the kind of
less disturbing than this reality.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like it would be too heavy-handed. People would say this, you can't write this kind of thing. But here we are. So Ali, talk about this this new. It's literally called the GREAT Plan, GREAT. What can we say about this?
Yeah, I want to talk about this a little, but I don't actually want to talk about the plan very much because in a way I think it's beside the point. But this was revealed in the Washington Post. I think it was on over the weekend. I was in County Clare in the west of Ireland and speaking to an event hosted by the Clare branch of the Ireland Palestine Solidarity Campaign. And as I was on my way there, I was really thinking about this and some of the historical parallels that it evoked for me. And we'll get into that in a few minutes. But let's look first at what this horrific plan is. And it came out first, it was revealed in this Washington Post story. And you can see the headline there: Gaza post-war plan envisions voluntary relocation of entire population. And I'll just read a bit of it. It says, a post-war plan for Gaza circulating with the Trump administration, modeled on President Donald Trump's vow to take over the enclave, would turn it into a trusteeship administered by the United States for at least 10 years, while it is transformed into a gleaming tourism resort and high-tech manufacturing and technology hub. The 38-page prospectus seen by the Washington Post envisions at least a temporary relocation of all of Gaza's more than 2 million population, either through what it calls voluntary departures to another country or into restricted, secured zones inside the enclave during reconstruction. Now, just as an aside, restricted, secured zones has another word that is well known from history, invented by the British in Southern Africa, and then this is not the right word, perfected by the Nazis in World War II, which is a concentration camp. Those who own land would be offered a digital token by the trust in exchange for rights to redevelop their property to be used to finance a new life elsewhere, or eventually redeemed for an apartment in one of 6 to 8 new AI-powered smart cities to be built in Gaza. Each Palestinian who chooses to leave would be given a $5,000 cash payment and subsidies to cover 4 years of rent elsewhere, as well as a year of food. So that's just to give a flavor of this. And as you mentioned, Nora, it's called the Gaza Reconstruction, Economic Acceleration and Transformation Trust, or GREAT. And it was developed by some of the same Israelis who created and set in motion the so-called Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, which whose dystopic name it actually does the opposite. It's murders Palestinians while they attempt to seek aid.
Yeah.
And the Washington Post later published the whole document that it obtained, and I think we can look at that now. And I just want to, we're not going to go through it in detail because it is all disgusting and horrifying. And those AI images are ones that were previously released by Benjamin Netanyahu's office. So we know where this all originates. But I just want to look at
the subtitle. I just have to point out the subtitle.
Yeah.
From a demolished Iranian proxy to a prosperous Abrahamic ally. I mean, just...
It looks so amateurishly done as well.
And who demolished it? And who demolished it? Yeah, it is amateurish, and we can laugh at it in a way. But remember,
it's very disturbing too. Yeah.
The context for this is the systematic destruction of Gaza City that we're seeing now. So these people are deadly serious in a way. They're not serious about helping people from Gaza, but they are serious about destroying it.
Taking the land, as they've always done.
Yeah. But let's just look at page 6, because that to me is just so emblematic of just the horrifying thinking in this. It's the one titled Reimagining Gaza 10 Mega Projects. And just to give you a sense of how gross this is. So there's the Abraham Gateway. So that's a reference to the so-called Abrahamic or the Abraham Accords tying Israel to US-backed Arab tyrannies in the Gulf in particular. And then there's the MBS Ring and MBZ Central Highway. So MBS, Mohammed bin Salman, the head-chopping crown prince of Saudi Arabia, the effective ruler who just less than 2 weeks ago executed somebody in Saudi Arabia for going out protesting when he was 15 years old, and who was, of course, notorious for dismembering with a bone saw Jamal Khashoggi, the Saudi dissident journalist. So he'll get a highway named after him. And then MBZ, Mohammed bin Zayed, who is the despot of the Israel-allied United Arab Emirates dictatorship. And then there's the Elon Musk Smart Manufacturing Zone and the Gaza Trump Riviera and Islands. So this is just to give a sense of how revolting this is in every possible way. But that's not really what, caught my attention. It's this claim that the people of Gaza are going to be helped by this, that they're going to be given a digital token, whatever that is. I don't know, it's a QR code or something, for their land, for the very land of Palestine, that they can redeem in the future for something or other. And so it's this promise, and or they can leave or they can go into a concentration camp, effectively. It's this promise of something in the future while they're being murdered now. And what it reminded me of when I read this immediately is something that Asa has reported on. I'm going to ask Asa to talk about this, but just in brief, it reminds me of the notorious episode of Rezo Kastner during World War II. He was a senior Zionist organization operative in Hungary who collaborated with the Nazis, with Adolf Eichmann, and his collaboration involved lying to the Jews in the ghettos in Hungary and telling them, look, you're going to be resettled in greener pastures. And so get on the trains because you're going to be taken to a better place. And in fact, they did board the trains and they were taken to Auschwitz and murdered. 500,000 Jews in Hungary. That's what came to mind. Asa, why don't you talk a little bit more about this episode to give people context for this comparison?
Yeah, I could talk about that just very, very quickly on the digital token. It does say in the PDF of this the plan that was leaked to the Washington Post that they talk about developing a blockchain registry. So this is like, crypto bro, kind of nonsense basically. Yes. So Hungary in 1944, in March 1944, towards the end of the Second World War, and towards the end of in the final phase of the Holocaust, Nazi Germany invaded Hungary, and before that they'd had an alliance with a kind of puppet dictator, but in March 1944 they invaded Hungary. And what you've got to remember is, of course, now the Holocaust is very well documented, but actually it was at the time it wasn't known. It wasn't known by many people of what was actually happening. It was clear that the Jews were being oppressed by the Nazis, but in terms of a systematic eradication, deliberate genocide of the Jewish people of Europe, that wasn't very widely known about. But someone who did know about it was this man you mentioned, Ali, Rezo Kastner, also known as Rudolf Kastner. And he was a local leader of the Zionist movement in Hungary. And he made a deal. Long story short, you can read about this in Tony Greenstein's book, Zionism During the Holocaust. I've got a chapter in my book which touches on it as well. Long story short, he made a deal with Adolf Eichmann, who was later executed as a war criminal, and it was one of the that's Tony Greenstein's book. Thank you, Tamara. He was later executed as a war criminal, but Kastner made a deal with him to essentially deceive the Jewish community in Hungary into going to the death camps. And the way they did that was, what you have to remember is this is 1944, just the year before there'd been a massive uprising in the Warsaw Ghetto, the ghetto that the Jews in Poland had been driven into, where they were being oppressed and where they were being deported to death camps. There was an uprising. There was an armed uprising by the Jewish armed groups in the Warsaw Ghetto. It was defeated, but the Nazis wanted to make sure that didn't happen again, because what was happening, of course, was the Red Army was advancing from the east. And so, what was necessary for Kastner to do was, and what he made a deal with the Nazis to do, was to deceive the Jewish community in Hungary and say, you'll be relocated safely within Hungary to work camps, and his men actually sent out postcards, like fake postcards of people, of Jewish people who were living happily in these work camps in Hungary, where actually what happened was they were then deported to Auschwitz, the notorious death camp, and the result was that 500,000 Hungarian Jews were systematically massacred and added to the death toll of the Holocaust. And so, in these plans, it says that Palestinians will leave temporarily and voluntarily, and then they'll be able to come back if so they choose. There's absolutely no reason to believe if they chose to leave that they would be allowed to come back. So it is incredibly reminiscent of that episode from World War II history.
Yeah. John, I want to get your 2 cents on this as well. Because this plan is absurd and ridiculous, but it's also, it also assumes that Palestinians are going to surrender, that they're going to accept these digital blockchain. I don't even like it's so ridiculous. And and then they'll accept either these $5,000 cash payments to leave their home. What does this assume, and how are you looking at this?
Well, in one of those slides, one of the slides showed the collapse of the economy in Gaza. And it's very notable because they mark it and it says that the collapse began with the election of Hamas. Well, that collapse was imposed. It was a blockade, a siege that dismantled the economy of the Gaza Strip. And the World Bank at the time called it the greatest economic collapse in modern history, because the same genocidal supporting countries that are doing their thing today did it back then. And when Hamas won a free and fair election, they blockaded the Gaza Strip and destroyed the economy. And they put it in that slideshow as if this is like, look, it's proof that, Hamas destroyed the economy. So now we give them digital tokens. And it's just, it's really a sinister whole program. I mean, the thing that I would say about it is like, Gaza needs a port. There's a port in this plan. Keep the port and get rid of the rest of the plan. Like the port, give Gaza a port that they can trade with the outside world without being controlled by Israel, without being controlled by Egypt. Give them their own port and let them rebuild their own economy. Pay reparations for the destruction that your weapons funded. You could pick the countries that can pay for the reparations and allow Palestinians to do it. They don't need Jared Kushner and Elon Musk and the Gulf despots. They can do it themselves, and that is the way that this war should be ending. That's what those proposals should be. They should be for reparations and give Palestinians the heavy machinery to clean up the genocide, and have a port where they can trade with the outside world. It could be a lot simpler than this.
And the most simple option, obviously, and the one that makes the most sense and is the most humane, and the one that abides by all the international legal obligations, if that even is a thing that means anything anymore, is the right of return for Palestine, 80% of whom in Gaza are not from Gaza. They're from towns, cities, and villages on the other side of the so-called Israel boundary. But
also, if you have a port, people can return to Gaza who are not allowed to go through the nexus of control through Egypt, for stateless people without proper passports. Give them a port where people can come. There's lots of solutions to this situation that could be thought through. This one is dystopian is like an understatement, because it's so deeply rooted in Israeli policy. Like, to say that the economy in that chart, they compare it to the West Bank, and they say, oh, the West Bank had moderate economic growth, but look at Gaza collapsed after 2006. Like they were on a caloric intake requirement done by person. They weren't allowed to ship anything in and out. It's just, it's very frustrating.
And you can tell the people who wrote it don't have a clue what they're talking about. They don't have the first familiarity with actual people in the region, let alone in Gaza. Like if Tamara, if you can bring up page 8, I mean, it looks like some of it was possibly, you know, this report was possibly constructed by AI, because there's this image on page 8 which just, you know, it looks like they sort of said, hey, you know, hey, hey, ChatGPT, generate, you know, an image of a new Gaza that looks like Dubai, because it literally looks like a sort of Dubai.
Yeah, that's in fact what happened, Asa. The images earlier in the document were previously published by Netanyahu's office, so that gives us a clue who's really behind this. And even the Washington Post says that the authors of this are many of the same Israelis who were behind the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. But none of this is to be taken at face value. They don't really plan to do any of this. This is all a way to market their genocide, to put a spin on their genocide, that the extermination of the Palestinian people in Gaza is good for the Palestinian people, just like making those Jews in Hungary board the trains to Auschwitz is good for the Jews of Hungary. That's what
it's all to impress, you know, their allies in the Gulf. It's all to, you know, this is
the people they hope will fund it.
Absolutely, the people they hope will, you know, will continue to let the West massacre Palestinians until they can do what they want. Like exactly.
And I think, as Ali says, like, it's not a serious plan for reconstruction. It's a way to trick They probably see it as a way to trick Palestinians into leaving with these kind of sort of glittering promises. But, you know, I think it's interesting to make the historical parallels to Hungary and the Holocaust and so forth. I think the big difference is that Palestinians are not going to be tricked like that, because they have the historical precedents. You know, everybody in Gaza, especially, you know, as it was said, 80% of them, of whom are refugees and the immediate descendants of refugees, was brought up on the stories of how their fathers, mothers, grandfathers, and grandmothers, you know, in the Nakba, left, you know, hoping to come back immediately, and have still not been allowed to go back to their homes.
Well, the problem, or really the reality, is that Israel is systematically destroying everything in Gaza, and there will be no housing, no hospitals, no water, no sanitation, no jobs. There's already no food. And so people, no matter how resilient they may be, no matter how much they have tried to hang on, will have no choice but to leave. That is the calculation. And it's the reality that people in Gaza are reaching levels of desperation and hardship that even in 2 years of genocide, they have not seen before. So that's why Israel has to be stopped from completing this genocide. This is the final solution. This is the final solution for Gaza, the total annihilation of Gaza, and marketing this mass murder as good for the Palestinians. It's exactly the same as what the Nazis and their Zionist collaborators did in Hungary, updated with techno-bro jargon. And that is the utter horror of what we're dealing with. And the world is still, you know, Emmanuel Macron announced he's going to have a conference co-hosted with the very same Mohammed bin Salman, the head chopper bone saw, Mohammed bin Bone Saw, in New York at the UN on the two-state solution, the most irrelevant conference ever. And no Palestinians will even be there, because even the collaborationist Vichy-style leadership of the Palestinian Authority can't be there, because the United States has, in violation of the UN headquarters agreement by which it hosts the UN, banned them from coming to the United States. And the UN is now so weak and useless that they're just carrying on. I haven't checked for a couple of days, but in the first day or two after this, Antonio Guterres, the UN Secretary General, said nothing. This means the end of the UN as a sovereign international entity. If Marco Rubio can decide which world leaders come to the UN. And many have been recalling the precedent in 1988 when Yasser Arafat was going to the UN General Assembly as the head of the Palestine Liberation Organization to address it. And the Reagan administration, Reagan or George H.W. Bush, I can't remember exactly. But anyway, the US administration refused to give him a visa. So the entire UN voted to move its General Assembly session to Geneva. And that was their way of preserving the sovereignty of the United Nations, that no one country, let alone the host country, gets to dictate who can come to the UN. So by taking this lying down, there's been no discussion even of moving the UN session. And I don't say this out of any support of the Palestinian Authority. Everyone knows what I think of them. The point is about the UN sovereignty, that the state of Palestine is recognized by UN institutions. It's a member state, an observer member state, but it's a full member of many UN institutions, including the International Criminal Court. And Marco Rubio said that the recognized head of this so-called state of Palestine can't come to the UN. And they just shrug. Well, it means the UN is nothing. It means it's now subservient to the US State Department. So it's all a parade of shame and complicity and vileness that defies description. Disgusting. Talk about a two-state solution. The only reason to talk about that is to preserve Israel as a racist, so-called Jewish state. I don't accuse true faithful Jews of having anything to do with this entity. Instead of talking about stopping the genocide, stopping the Holocaust, sanctioning this entity, when we've seen lie after lie after lie from governments that claim to be supporting Palestine. Last week, we had this announcement from Hakan Fidan, the foreign minister of Turkey, claiming that Turkey has closed its airspace to Israeli aircraft. And that was a big announcement that turned out to be a lie. They said the only thing we're closing Turkish airspace to is Israeli government planes or planes carrying weapons. But Israeli commercial traffic continues to fly over Turkey. And I don't know if the Turkish government is inspecting the cargoes of those commercial planes to find out what they're carrying, because we know Israel carries military cargoes in commercial planes. And we know that the oil that Israel relies on to fuel the jets and the bulldozers and the tanks that are carrying out this genocide flows from Azerbaijan across Turkish territory and then is taken to Israel. And Turkey hasn't stopped that either. We saw this announcement while I was in Ireland that the Irish Central Bank was going to give up its role of being the key facilitator of the sale of Israel bonds within the European Union. And people welcome that as an important victory for the demands of the Irish people to stop the Irish state's complicity in this genocide. But I was very saddened to see that this morning the Irish-Palestine Solidarity Campaign had issued a statement calling this out as a sham, that the Irish Central Bank really just is repackaging its involvement in order to conceal it. And I'll just ask Tamara to put up this statement so people can see what I'm talking about. And there's the IPSC statement saying that it condemns the central bank's duplicitous offshoring of complicity in Israel's genocide, and that that really it's just smoke and mirrors. So, but it does show that the Irish state and its institutions are aware that the Irish people are utterly horrified by their government's complicity in this Holocaust, and they're trying to cover it up. But I know the people of Ireland will not take this lying down. They'll continue to escalate their nationwide campaign to end the Irish state's complicity in this Holocaust. And that's what people in every state should be doing. And it's just, that's what, if Israel isn't paying a price for this Holocaust, it's not going to stop. And the resistance on the ground are making Israel pay a price militarily, but it has to pay a price economically, diplomatically. This pariah, this murderous entity, has to be isolated in every way possible from the rest of humanity.
Well said. No notes. Thank you so much, Ali.
Can I add
one
quick thing just to say, Tamara, if you could put the Nazi collaborator story on the screen, if people want to read more about the whole 𝐓𝐡𝐞, the history of the 𝐓𝐡𝐞 collaboration with the Nazis, read this as well as Tony Greenstein's book that we mentioned earlier. You can read this article that we published back in 2021, which has a kind of potted history of the whole thing in it there. Why is Owen Jones defending a Nazi collaborator? You can read more about Rudolf Kastner there.
Thanks, Asa. Excellent. So, Ali, you've been covering this story about Tom Alexandrovich. It kind of disappeared from Western, well, it was hardly in Western media, and then
never covered in the mainstream media. It's only been covered by independent media like us, some international media, and local Las Vegas media in Nevada, where this story occurred, and we have been covering it. And I just wanted to give a quick update, and just a reminder for people who aren't familiar with this. This is a story about Tom Alexandrovich. He is a senior Israeli cyber warrior. He heads the defense division of Israel's National Cyber Directorate. And in early August, he was caught in a local and federal police sting in Las Vegas to catch child sex predators. And he was arrested while going to a location where he thought he was going to meet with a 15-year-old girl he had been chatting with online, and that he was going to meet her for sex. And that is a crime, attempting to lure a child for rape. It's a serious crime. He was arrested, and then despite the fact that federal officials knew that he was trying to leave the country, he was allowed to walk out on a routine $10,000 bail with no conditions and promptly flew back to Israel. Then what happened is that at his next scheduled court date, which was supposed to be on August 27th, he failed to appear. Surprise, surprise. And you can see the reporting there
which is a serious offense on top of the crime that he is
his lawyer, this high-powered lawyer in Las Vegas, David Chesnoff. I talked about him on the previous show and all his various connections. He went before the judge and said, I told my client not to come. And the judge said, you had no right to do that. And in fact, this is easily verifiable. I looked it up, that it is up to the judge. You can submit a request to appear remotely to the judge. It has to be done at least 4 judicial days before the hearing, and the court has to approve it. None of that was done. He just decided not to come, and the judge said this was not authorized, and so he ordered the Alexandrovich, the judge, she ordered rather, Barbara Shkifalakwa, ordered Alexandrovich to appear, and she allowed him to appear by Zoom on September 3rd, which was yesterday, and he did appear by Zoom. You can see a screenshot there. And I'll just give an update on what happened there, because the judge reminded him that this is, I'm just looking for through my notes here. Yeah, I think the judge misspoke, but what they said, sorry, this is the quote. This court can't underscore the serious nature of the offense alleged here and carrying the weight it does regarding a potential sentence, 𝐓𝐡𝐞 said. I'm not sure if that's a misstatement by the judge or a misprint by the media, but I think what the judge was saying is this court can't underscore enough the serious nature of the offense. This is an offense that carries up to 10 years in prison. And the judge imposed additional restrictions on Aleksandrovich. She did not increase the bail of $10,000, but she imposed conditions, including that the defendant, Aleksandrovich, may not use or access any social media sites or applications used for the purpose of dating or meeting up, and he may not be alone with any children under the age of 18. Obviously, he's in Israel, and so there is no way for the court to enforce those conditions on him. The next court date is set for October 6th, and that may include, I'm not sure if it's going to be the preliminary hearing or another hearing in the case, but it is proceeding, and the judge did underscore the seriousness of the offense. So we're going to keep following this and see where it goes.
It's such a depraved, disgusting story. And thanks for covering it. I know it's not easy. Thank you.
It reminds me, Ali, of the articles you've done in the past about the French JDL, you know, the Jewish Defense League, extremists who fled justice in France. To Israel.
That's right. And those, one of those cases involved a death, that someone lost their life due to the activities, allegedly due to the activities of these pro-Israel French extremists. One of them in particular Gregory Celli, also known as 𝐓𝐡𝐞. Thank you, Tamara, because his name was not coming to me right now, and you were able to pull that up. So Gregory Celli is a French extremist accused in the death of the father of a journalist who had written things critical of Israel. That Gregory Celli had harassed this family to the point that he caused, this is the allegation, basically caused the father's death just because his son, a professional journalist, had done his job. And he has been, for the past year, it's been quite a few years since this alleged crime, and Gregory Celli is still hiding in Israel. The French government has requested his extradition, but of course they take absolutely no measures to pressure Israel to force him to come back and face justice. So we'll see what happens with Aleksandrovich, but Israel is known as a safe haven for these types of criminals.
Ever since its inception. Thank you so much, Ali. And let's take a moment to look at the website. Let's talk about some of the features. I read Asim and Nabih's feature that he wrote, and we published just yesterday about his sister, of course. We've published 2 or 3 more stories since then. Ali, what stood out for you this week about that we published? Oh, you're muted. You're muted, Ali. There we go. Oh, hopefully.
Sorry, I'm multitasking here,
That's
but
fine.
I have to. I still have to catch up on some of my reading because I've been traveling. But the piece by Asim and Nabih about about Mohammed al-𝐓𝐿, and you can see there the the photo of them together. Of course, Mohammed 𝐓𝐿 is one of the journalists who was murdered along with Anas al-Sharif, was very moving. And the piece by Khalid al-Hissi, Israel uses aid to exploit and humiliate. Khalid, of course, is from Gaza, has lived through, experienced the genocide himself and understands the situation there. And he's now in Jordan. He's written about how he's been there for cancer treatment, and but this is a very good analytical piece. And all of these features by our writers in Gaza are just extraordinary. And of course, a shout out is to our colleague David Cronin, who continues to hold the feet of the EU to the fire, particularly Katharina von Schnurbein. You can see that top feature there, or the top headline there on the page. She's the EU's so-called anti-Semitism coordinator, but she is really a lobby for genocide, a lobby for the Israeli genocide, a lobbyist for the Israeli genocide. And David Cronin uncovered some more information about how she's been helping the Israel lobby. So read that.
Thank you. And I wanted to give a special shout out to Pierre Loisel, who has been working with us to produce the Electronic Intifada radio show. And I just wanted to mention it is a weekly 58-minute long radio show that features the highlights from this live stream, as well as our podcast and the website packaged specifically for radio audiences. And we've been kind of collecting different radio stations around the country and in Canada who are picking it up, and more are taking it. So, in Canada, you can hear it on CITR in Vancouver, 𝐤𝐞𝐄 in Montreal, CKMS in Waterloo, CFUR in Prince George. In the US, you can hear it on KPFA, of course, in the San Francisco Bay Area on Tuesdays, and WBAI in New York. And if you'd like to hear the show on the airwaves in your community, contact your local radio station. Let them know it's on all the independent public media distribution platforms. So tell them that you want Electronic Intifada Radio. Just wanted to give a shout out and thank you to Pierre for all that diligent work. And with that, a shout out, of course, always to Tamara Nassar for directing and producing and translating and all the things that she does all the time. Thank you, Tamara. Thank you to Ellie Gerzon for social media, to Michael F. Brown for fact-checking, Maureen Claire Murphy, our senior editor, everyone at the Electronic Intifada. Ali, did you have people you wanted to thank this week?
Always. I want to thank everyone. And as we were saying, Nora, you and I, we talked about this earlier in the show, but we also talked about it off air, what it meant to us to meet some of the people who read, listen, and watch the Electronic Intifada in person, and to hear how much this work means to you. And that means the world to us. And it really was very heartwarming, and I needed to hear it, because it reminds us that there is a purpose to this work, and it's helping to rally people and motivate them and keep them willing and able to go out and keep protesting, to keep educating people. And that's what we want to do. We want people to be informed so they can go out and use this information to fight for justice. And so we're very grateful to each and every person for all the ways you support our work, including those who make donations to keep us going. And again, we only want people to make a gift, which they can do by going to the electronicintifada.net and clicking donate now. Please only do it if you can afford it. Don't do it at the expense of your basic needs, because there's enough people who can afford it. That's the beauty of this, and that makes this information available for everyone, and that's always our goal. We'll never charge people. We'll never have a paywall. You'll never have to pay to read an article or watch a video. This will always be free for everyone, thanks to the generosity of so many people. I'm just going to name a few of our recent supporters, and that's just to say thank you to Emily, Susanna, Huzaifa, Abdurrahman, Rosalie, Finton, Adila, Mark, JC, Andrew, Stephen, Carol, Yazan, Amin, Azhar, Carlos, Erdal, Maria, and Colin. That's just a few of the people who are always so generous in supporting our work and keeping us going.
Thank you to everyone, and of course, yeah, you can go to electronicintifada.net, hit the donate now link. There are the monthly donation options. And thank you to everyone who's constantly sharing our articles and our videos. Together we're stronger. Thank you to you, Ali, to John, Asa, Tamara, and on behalf of everyone at the Electronic Intifada, thank you all for listening and watching, and we'll see you next week.